Our family was strong, built on trust and honesty. We were open with each other, and our intimacy was fulfilling. Little did I know that I would soon discover that I was hiding something from my wife after only 2 years of our marriage. It seems that long separations sometimes have unexpected consequences. Our shared education in biology provided a solid foundation, but after university, our career paths diverged. While I found stability and fulfillment in a local lab, my wife craved adventure. When she was presented with the opportunity to work in another city, she gladly accepted. She now spends much of her time traveling, collecting biological samples all over the country. Although I was happy for her because she had found the job she wanted, I was anxious about the long separation from my beloved. I was used to falling asleep with her in my arms and waking up to her youth and passion. My mother-in-law, Emma, was a progressive woman who understood the natural inclinations of young couples in the early years of marriage. She often left us alone at home, leaving unexpectedly for a walk during the day. Such long separations from my wife, however, proved to be an ordeal for me. If during 3-4 days I could concentrate on work and other duties, then after a week I began to see women's bodies everywhere. I confess that I even caught myself looking at my mother-in-law, but I quickly dismissed these thoughts. Nevertheless, when my wife returned, I clung to her tightly, not wanting to let her go. Fortunately, she welcomed and appreciated our frequent moments of intimacy. Shortly afterward, she left again for another business trip for work. It was much easier for her to get over our separation than it was for me. The most difficult aspect of our life together was her absence for an entire month. Not knowing how I would cope without her or where to focus my efforts, I prepared for the worst. Surprisingly, the first time was manageable. I dove headfirst into my work, devoting long hours and receiving generous bonuses. However, returning late at night to an empty bed, I quickly began to feel the weight of its absence. Sleep would not come, and I would toss and turn for hours. The morning, however, was even more difficult. I had to save myself by immersing my body in cold water. But I still had to get to the bathroom, even though my mother-in-law was moving around the apartment. Slipping past her was impossible, and when we found ourselves face to face, I noticed her obvious curiosity about me. We exchanged hurried greetings, and I quickly disappeared into the bathroom. It felt rather ridiculous, like I was running away from her. Surprisingly, my mother-in-law remembered the moment too. The next day, which was Saturday, I allowed myself to sleep longer. I was awakened by my wife, who was on the phone bragging about another accomplishment on her trip. Listening to her, I tried to make sense of her words. Her voice alone had a profound effect on my body, similar to the effect of taking Viagra. After talking to my beloved for about 10 minutes, I got out of bed to stretch. I desperately wanted to go to the bathroom, but I couldn't risk being seen by my mother-in-law for the second day in a row in this condition. To distract myself, I tried doing various warm-up exercises, but nothing seemed to help. Disregarding the possible consequences, I ventured out into the hallway, and of course, I accidentally ran into my mother-in-law. It was as if she had been waiting for me, frightening me not only with her sudden appearance, but also with her gaze. She was wearing a negligee. At first, I mistook it for a nightgown, but naturally, I didn't scrutinize it, hurriedly slipping into the bathroom. The shower had a positive effect on me, not only on my body, but on my mind as well. After spending a fair amount of time in the shower and taking care of my hygiene, I headed for the kitchen. Emma was a skilled cook and appreciated when her food was enjoyed. I shamelessly took advantage of this and relied on my mother-in-law's cooking for every meal. When my wife wasn't home, I didn't bother with breakfast, lunch, or dinner. "George, I didn't know when you would wake up, so I didn't cook anything." "Let me make something now," she said. "Yes, of course, thank you." "I'd be glad to," I replied without looking at her. As I sat down at the table, I glanced at her and quickly averted my eyes. She was still dressed the same. My imagination ran wild again, threatening to consume me. Good thing I had time to sit down I thought to myself. Emma seemed to be teasing me, pacing back and forth in front of me. I couldn't take my eyes off her, and I didn't want to. My cheeks flushed, and my mouth was dry. I swallowed hard, continuing to watch her, almost in a trance. Suddenly, Emma turned around and looked me in the eye. "What's the matter? Why are you looking at me like that? Are you okay?" she asked, looking concerned. "I'm fine. Just brooding," I replied. "You're dressed so strangely." "It's just a nightgown. Nothing out of the ordinary." "It seems to be more than that," I said. "You're acting weird, George." Emma smiled and said, "You miss your wife, don't you? You don't have to say anything. I understand. What is it about this conversation that bothers you?" she asked. "Nothing, just your appearance," I replied. "You seem to be expressing your displeasure." No, you're an incredibly beautiful woman. I sincerely admire your looks." However, our conversation was suddenly interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. "Please open the door." "I can't do that." "What's the problem?" "Ah, now I understand." She repeated her words with a smirk. Emma interrupted her cooking for a moment and opened the door for the messenger. When she returned, she turned to face the stove. Without stopping to smile, she inquired, "I'm curious. Is it the lack of a wife that's affecting you this way, or my appearance?" "What are you implying, Emma?" "Certainly the former." I swallowed the saliva that had accumulated in my mouth again. Let's see what she has in mind, I thought. "You must have different thoughts, don't you?" my mother-in-law sweetly remarked. "Yes," I replied dryly. Hearing my answer, she stepped aside and gave me a strange look and went off to her room. I jumped up from the table and ran after her. Several plates and cups flew to the floor and, from the sound of it, shattered. I paid no attention to this, however. Meanwhile, the eggs in the skillet continued to sizzle on the stove. I hadn't noticed how much time had passed, and the consequences of my actions didn't immediately occur to me. Well, breakfast was ruined. My mother-in-law expressed her disappointment. "I'll make a fresh one," she offered. No, something clicked in my head. Let's just do it again. What we had in the bedroom.